I think this is the worst but most relatable phenomena of a book reader's life. Hey guys, what's up? It's Julie the Bibliophile. I am back. I am here filming a video about books. How long has it been since I've done that? Today I am going to be talking about a not so fun subject to talk about, but you know, one that I wanted to make a video about anyway, and that is books that ruined their series for me. Now in this video, I'm not just talking about books that were my least favorite in the series, books that I didn't like so much. I am talking about books that completely and totally decimated any love that I had left for that series that they were in. You know, those books that just are so bad, usually a concluding book, not always, but the books that are so bad that they just ruin everything. Well, that's what I'm here to talk about today. It's going to be a shorter video because it's fortunately a short list. But since quarantine hit, I've been super into reading again, and after I finish rereading Harry Potter, I'm planning on reading a ton of new books and series, so this list might grow. But for now, it's short. Oh, before I begin, spoiler alert! There's a spoiler alert for all the series that I'm going to be talking about. I am going to be talking spoilers, so go check the description for the timestamps of the books that I'm talking about, and if you don't want to be spoiled for that series, go ahead and skip ahead. So the first book I'm talking about today is an honorable mention, and it's only an honorable mention because I didn't actually read the book. But there's a reason why I didn't read the book. And I do think that this is more severe of a letdown for me than some of the other books on this list, but because I didn't actually read the book, it's only an honorable mention. However, even though I didn't read the book, it is on this list because when I got spoiled about what happens in this book, it ensured that I would never read the rest of the series. And that is The Burning Maze by Rick Riordan, and this is the third book in the Trials of Apollo series, which is the third series in the Percy Jackson universe. Unless you're considering Magnus Chase, at the same time of Trials of Apollo, I really don't know. So, I don't even want to say by name what happens in The Burning Maze, but if you're watching this, you probably know. You probably know. I had read the first Trials of Apollo book, and then I said, in my freshman year of college, I kind of stopped reading altogether. That is fixed now, but I wasn't reading, so I didn't read the rest of Trials of Apollo. And I got spoiled. I found out, on Tumblr, what happens in The Burning Maze. And I remember I found out, a week before I was going to Disney World with my best friend. My best friend comes over to get ready to go to Disney World, and we kind of just look at each other, and we were talking about it, and trying to, without saying the words, asking each other if we had found out the same spoiler. Would like to disclaim that I love Rick Riordan very, very much. I love and respect him very much. I love and respect all the Percy Jackson books very much. But after what I found out about The Burning Maze, I just have no desire to read Trials of Apollo. I think it's kind of overly tragic. I'm not really big into huge amounts of tragedy in books, and to be fair, I would have to read the book to know for myself if I thought the death made sense, but I don't like main character deaths. That's not something that I'm into personally for me, even if it's more realistic. I don't go to books for them to be realistic. I go to books to escape. I go to books to escape the harsh realities of the real world and to, get to live in these worlds with these characters and see them triumph through immense tragedy. See them still have victory and happiness and see everything be okay in the end after everything has not been okay. So for me to put in a death that major, it kind of turns me off. Okay, so spoiler alert, and I said that, but obviously I'm talking about Jason's death. I feel like after we finished Heroes of Olympus, after we finished Blood of Olympus, that was the end of the story for the main 7. I feel like we really should have left it there. You end Blood of Olympus, they all make it through, and then as soon as Jason's not a main character anymore, you kill him off. I don't get it. I'm sorry. It makes no sense to me, and I just have no desire to do it. In my mind, Jason is happy and alive and happy with Piper, and, they're all chilling out and going to movies and stuff. Okay, now we're getting into the actual list, and these are books that I read, and they were so bad to me or so upsetting to me that I either A, stopped reading the series in the middle of it, or B, just lost any connection to or affection for the series at all, or feelings for the characters. And in some cases, it's more extreme than others, and that's why we're going down the list. There are 5 books on this list, and so without further ado, number 5 is Beautiful Darkness by Cami Garcia and Margaret Stoll. This is the second book in the Castor Chronicles series. I don't remember a lot about this book because I read it in like the 9th grade, and I'm graduating college now, so it was quite some time ago. I do remember that I was really into BookTube, you know, it was like 2012, 2013, YA fantasy dystopias were really starting to hit like the height of their hype. I was in high school, so I was getting into YA fantasy and dystopia for the first time. I was on BookTube, and everybody was talking about Beautiful Creatures, about Castor Chronicles. So naturally, I read what people told me to read and what was popular, and I read Beautiful Creatures, and I loved it. And so I was super, super excited to read Beautiful Darkness, and then I hated it. I forced myself to sit through this entire book and read this entire book, and I think it took me a whole month to get through it, which is not so odd for me now, but back then I used to go through a book of this size like at least once a week, maybe once every 2 weeks if it was really big. But this book would take me at max a week and a half, 2 weeks normally, and it took me like a month. I just remember being bored. I don't remember all of the details, but I remember being bored. I remember Ethan being whiny. I remember Lena kind of turning into a bitch. And it just wasn't at the same level as the first book for me. And I stopped reading it. And that's very odd for me. The reason that I read this whole book was because I was at a period in my life where I still refused to DNF anything, especially if it was a book that I paid money for. I'm not like that anymore because I'm not 13 and I'm not stubborn. Well, I'm still stubborn, but not in the way that I was when I was 13 and 14. But I did stop reading the series, which was a big thing for me to do. And I remember talking to a friend and her telling me that it didn't get any better after this one, so I was kind of glad that I stopped. This book is so high up on the list, A, because I didn't get that far into the series to really be as attached to it as I was with some of the other books on this list, and B, because there wasn't anything that I really recall happening in this book that was so awful that turned me off. It was just boring. Okay, coming in at number 4, we have the first book where I felt a bad decision was made, like a really bad decision, and that is 7 Minutes in Heaven by Sarah Shepard. This is the 6th and final book in the Lying Game series. This one still makes me so mad. All of these still make me so mad. Oh my god. So, Lying Game was a very special series to me when I was in middle and early high school. I think I started reading them like probably somewhere in between 7th and 8th grade. This one came out right before I started the 10th grade. That's when I was reading it. And Lying Game was the first series that I remember being mine. Actually, there were more series that I felt like were mine that are still special to me to this day. But Lying Game was one of the first series that I felt was mine. It wasn't something that I read because everybody was reading. It wasn't something that I read because I saw it recommended on BookTube. Nobody else I knew was reading it. None of my friends were reading it, so it was mine. They were my books to love. I had such a personal relationship with these books. I was so hooked on the series, and then they just ruined it. If you haven't heard of The Lying Game, it is a mystery series about these twin sisters. They never met. They were separated at birth. When the series begins, we find out that one of the twin sisters is dead, and she's narrating this book, and she's watching on as her twin sister, who she never knew about, finds out about her murder, and then has to go to the town where she lived, pretend to be her, and solve her murder, because nobody knows that she's dead. And it was such a great series. There were some issues I had with it, where, like, you always thought every book that the person they thought the killer was definitely it, and then it wasn't, and it kind of became a predictable pattern. But in this book, the whole town and everybody related to the dead twin sister, Sutton, finally finds out that Sutton is dead, and that Emma, her sister, has been pretending. So they all accuse Emma of the murder. But so throughout the books, Emma has a boyfriend named Ethan. And he is the only person who knows throughout the series that Emma is not Sutton. And he's there for her through the whole series. It was one of my first OTPs. Again, that was mine. That wasn't a ship because everybody else shipped it. And then Ethan is the murderer. Like, I just felt so betrayed by this book. It's high up on this list because I still feel good about having read the series as a whole. I don't regret having read the series, but that last decision definitely did haunt me. I remember I read it the night I was leaving for Disney World. I was sitting on the couch waiting to leave to get in the car, and I was reading it, and then I had to sit the whole car ride. the 20-hour car ride thinking about it. And I was just, oh man. If I think about this book too long, it still haunts me. Because it was just a decision that came out of nowhere for me. There was no evidence to back it up. And it felt like just a big shock factor decision, which is one of my biggest pet peeves in books. And it left a sour taste in my mouth, but I still feel good about reading this series. So, that's why this is number 4. Coming in at number 3, we actually have 2 books at once. This is number 3 on the list because I still feel good about the trilogy that came before them. These were tacked on to the trilogy after it was supposed to have ended, and I still like the trilogy. I still feel like it's a solid story, but these 2 books are just awful. And that is The Kiss and the Lost by James Patterson, The Kiss being written with Jill Dembowski, and The Lost being written with Emily Raymond. And these are the 4th and 5th books in the Witch and Wizard series. Witch and Wizard was another series that, like The Lion Game, was one of the first books that was mine. It was mine. I didn't read it because it was recommended by anybody. I had never heard of it until I picked it up at the bookstore. But I loved them. And it was a trilogy. And the trilogy was great. And then they came out with a 4th book. And I was super excited. And I read the 4th book. And the 4th book wasn't bad. It was just kind of repetitive. Instead of finding a new villain, they rebirthed and rehashed the villain from the 3rd book that had already been defeated. But I was cool with it. And then we came out with The Lost. And The Lost not only was basically the exact same book as The Kiss, like the exact same thing happened, the villain rebirthed in the exact same way, but everything you had loved in the final book of the Witch and Wizard series was killed off and destroyed in The Lost. It ruined everything. And I don't remember any of the specifics because, like I said, series was ruined for me, blocked it from my memory. But it's kind of like The Burning Maze for me. Like I said, how with Blood of Olympus, I felt like everything was over, and we have earned the fact that these characters all survived and are all happy, and that's how I felt about Witch and Wizard. And then in The Lost, you went and killed more of them off, and one character had a super good redemption arc just to be killed off at the end. It made me so mad. It made me so mad. This was probably one of the first books that I ever threw across the room, not out of melodramatic anger and still loving the book, but being emotional. This was one of the first books that I ever threw across the room because I didn't like it. And it made me angry. And I feel good about having read the Witch and Wizard trilogy. I do not feel good about having read these 2, so I still keep the Witch and Wizard trilogy on my bookshelf, but these have been in a bag to donate, and I'm trying to find someone to donate them to because I don't want anything to do with them. The next book hurts. Okay, and these last two are the really, really egregious ones for me. That these are the ones that I do not feel good about having read the whole series anymore. And they completely and totally decimated my love for a series that I used to adore. So coming in at number 2, we have The Fate of 10 by Pittacus Lore, also known as James Frey. And this is the 5th book, the penultimate book in the Lorien Legacies series, also known as I Am Number 4. This book ruined this series for me so much that I forget how much I used to love this series. And sometimes I go on the Lorien Legacies tag on my Tumblr and I see the amount of posts I used to make about it and how much I used to talk about it. And I remember that this was one of my favorite series in the whole world. I loved this series to the degree that I love Harry Potter now, to the degree that I love Kingdom Keepers now. It was that level of love. It was one of my favorite series of all time. And now I have absolutely no feelings about it whatsoever. Fate of 10 was a good book. As a whole, it was a good book. But what happened at the end, and again, I'm not being spoiler-free. I don't know why I'm talking like this. Sarah Hart was my favorite character. And she often got treated by fans like she was just the side accessory to John. She was just John's love interest, but I didn't feel that way about her. I thought she was a really well-rounded, deep, awesome character, and I loved her. And so not only was it the death of my favorite character, but it was also the fact that by killing her off to, hurt John, she did become that accessory to John. She just became that love interest to John, and that was really rotten to me. I didn't like that they didn't get to reunite before she died. Again, it's like that tragedy thing. It's too tragic. Books can have deaths in them. They can be sad, but this is a degree of too tragic. And I remember reading this, thinking that the Lorien Legacy series had been going downhill for quite some time because it had been getting too tragic. That was kind of you know, a common viewpoint among the fans, but when The Fate of 10 came out, it was just too much for me. This was another book that I threw across the room. I feel like I still have a picture of that somewhere because I was embarrassing when I was 16 years old. And I tried to read United as One, which is the final book, but I couldn't do it. I have the book, it's on my bookshelf, and I remember I was reading it the summer I went away to college, and that might have been what got me to stop reading, because I could not read United as One. I really, really tried. I tried not to be shallow and not to stop reading the series just because Sarah had been killed off, but I couldn't do it without Sarah. Then my mom and my best friend who did read United as One told me how it ended, and I am very glad that I did not read that book. Oh man, the Lorien Legacies was such a good series, and it just went so downhill. And finally, coming in at number 1 on my list, the worst offender. Oh, because not only did this book kill the series for me, this book killed the series for the whole world. I don't think I have met a single person who read this book and said they liked it, or who read this book and said that they still like the series. I don't think I've ever met anybody who doesn't hate this series now. I regret reading the entire thing. I used to love it. I was obsessed with it. I thought it was so well written, and after reading this book, I regret reading the series, and I think that is a general consensus among the YA book reading world. And that is, if you haven't guessed it already, Allegiant by Veronica Roth, the third and final book in the Divergent series. Oh. Why? My only question for this book is why. Like, I just want to know what she was thinking. I really want to know what in God's name she was thinking. And I think the death of Triss is not so much my problem. Well, it is my problem because, like I said, I don't like main character deaths. I don't like excess tragedy. I don't like sensationalized death. To me, you're going to have a character death. There needs to be a purpose, and I don't feel like this one had one. But then the way she tried to explain it off, I remember watching interviews with Veronica Roth after this book was written, that she said she needed to die because she needed to learn the true meaning of sacrifice. What? Did she not learn the meaning of sacrifice when her parents sacrificed themselves for her? Did she not learn the meaning of sacrifice when in Insurgent she willingly went to give her life to save her entire faction and all the Divergents? Did she not learn the meaning of sacrifice when she went to go do the thing that ended up killing her and took her brother's place even though her brother sucked? Like, I just don't understand Veronica Roth. To me, it is such a shallow, like, flat plot development, not deep at all, to think that the only way that a character can learn about sacrifice is by dying. That's a very literal interpretation to me. There's no deep thought in it. There's no critical thinking in it. And those are the kind of things that I crave in my book. And, you know, as an English major, as a writer, I just don't, that just doesn't gel with me. And I think in this book, she really kind of destroyed everything that everybody loved about the series. So it wasn't just Triss's death. It was the fact that all of a sudden, 4 is not a Divergent. All of a sudden, Uriah's dead. Everybody's dying. Oh, Tori died, but now we finally find Tori's brother, and Tori's brother that we thought was alive is dead. It was too much tragedy. It was too much canceling out everything that had already been written in the series. And I just, oh my God, has there ever been a more series-destroying book than Allegiant? I really don't think so, because I have all my Divergent books in a donation bag. I don't ever want to see them again. I don't want to think about them again. I regret reading the Divergent series because of Allegiant. I really wish I had never read it. And now I tell people not to read the Divergent series. When people tell me they want to read Divergent, I say don't. Like, I don't recommend it. And it's all because of this book. So that is my list. Thank God it was short, but I still have some very strong emotions about the books on it. If you like this video, please remember to like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments section below what books ruined series for you. Alright guys, thanks for watching and stay magical. Bye-bye!